June 11th, 1944, just outside Carentan, Normandy. The rain hasn't stopped for 2 days. It turns the dirt roads into rivers of brown sludge, and the fields into sucking mud that steals boots with every step. From the hedgerow, Gefreiter Karl Weiss peers through his binoculars at the swollen Douve River below. The water is high, fast, and angry, exactly as German engineers had hoped. The bridge is gone, or rather, what remains of it is gone. The center span was blown at dawn, dropped cleanly into the current by carefully placed demolition charges. Charred timbers poke from the water like broken ribs. To Weiss, it is a familiar and comforting sight. Rivers stop armies. They always have. Behind him, an MG-42 crew adjusts their firing arcs. The machine gun's barrel gleams dully in the grey light, already zeroed on the far bank. Mortar teams have pre-registered their targets. Artillery observers wait with field telephones, ready to call in fire the moment American infantry tries to force a crossing. This river was supposed to buy them time. At least a day, maybe 2. On the far side, American troops have halted at the water's edge. Weiss can see them clearly now. Helmets low, rifles slung, officers crouched over maps. No bridge, no boats, no obvious way across. He allows himself a thin smile. Then he notices something strange. The Americans aren't pulling back. They aren't probing for fords or spreading out along the riverbank like an army unsure of its next move. Instead, they are gathering in tight clusters, waving men forward from the rear. Trucks appear, not combat vehicles, but long flatbed lorries carrying awkward, angular shapes under tarps. Weiss lowers his binoculars, frowning. "What are they doing?" one of the machine gunners mutters. The answer arrives with the clank of steel. On the American side, Captain John Wallace, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, hops down from a 1.5-deuce truck and sinks ankle-deep into the mud. He swears, then grins anyway. This is exactly what he trained for. "All right, boys," he shouts over the rain. "Let's build ourselves a road." Canvas covers are ripped away. Beneath them lie stacks of steel panels, transoms and stringers, dull grey, scarred from previous crossings. The pieces look unimpressive to an untrained eye. No cranes, no concrete, no prefabricated bridge sections hauled in one piece. Just parts. But Wallace knows what they can become. The Bailey Bridge was designed for moments like this, simple enough to be assembled by hand, strong enough to carry tanks, and modular enough to be built under fire. British engineers had invented it earlier in the war. The Americans had embraced it with near religious fervor. Now it's about to be used exactly as intended. Orders snap through the air. Engineer squads move with practiced precision, laying down timber mats to create a stable working surface. Others begin assembling the first panels, bolting them together with gloved hands, slick from rain and grease. Metal rings against metal, a steady rhythmic sound. On the German side, Weiss stares in disbelief. "They're building a bridge," someone says quietly. It sounds ridiculous, insane even. Building a bridge under observation, under potential fire, across a flooded river that was supposed to halt an entire division. But the Americans don't hesitate. Within minutes, the first rectangular frames take shape. They are slid forward on rollers, inch by inch, pushed out over the water like the probing fingers of a machine that does not fear the river. Each new section locks into the last with a heavy, reassuring clang. The bridge begins to grow. German artillery finally opens up. Shells whistle overhead and crash into the river, sending up columns of muddy spray. One round lands short, another long. The engineers flinch, then keep working. "Keep it moving," Wallace shouts. "Ignore the splashes!" The bridge doesn't stop. Infantry smoke drifts across the far bank, thick and white, obscuring the work site. Somewhere, American artillery answers back, suppressing German batteries. The soundscape becomes chaos. Explosions, shouted commands, the roar of engines. Weiss watches the impossible unfold. Where there had been nothing but water less than an hour ago, steel now stretches halfway across the river. The Americans move with terrifying confidence, as if they have done this 100 times before. Because many of them have. He feels something cold settle in his stomach. This isn't improvisation. This is doctrine. The bridge reaches the far bank. Engineers leap into the water, boots disappearing beneath the surface as they anchor the final sections. Decking is laid down. Ramps are secured. A final inspection is done at a run. Wallace wipes rain from his eyes and raises his arm. "Bring 'em across." The first vehicle rolls onto the bridge, a jeep, then a truck, then another. The structure flexes but holds. The river, denied its victory, rushes uselessly beneath. On the German side, silence hangs for a moment. Then Weiss hears it. The deep, unmistakable rumble of American armor moving forward. Not tomorrow, not in 2 days, but now. The river had failed them, and this was only the beginning. June 11th, 1944. The Douve River crossing, Carentan sector. The first Sherman tank crawls onto the Bailey Bridge just after noon. From the German positions, the sound alone is enough to freeze conversation. The engine's low, grinding growl carries over the water, steady and confident, completely at odds with the shattered bridge that should still be blocking the road. Gefreiter Karl Weiss watches as the steel structure bows slightly under the weight, then holds. The tank's tracks clatter across the decking, each link striking metal with a hollow, mocking rhythm. A moment later, it reaches the far bank, pivots its turret, and begins firing into the hedgerows. The crossing is no longer theoretical. Behind the first tank comes another, then trucks, then half-tracks packed with infantry, rifles poking over the sides, faces smeared with mud and exhaustion. What should have been a pause in the American advance has become a funnel, a point of acceleration. Weiss feels the ground shake beneath his boots. "This isn't possible," the MG gunner mutters. "It's too fast." But speed is exactly the point. On the American side, Captain John Wallace barely looks up as the traffic begins to flow. His concern is no longer the bridge itself. It's the next one. Because everyone here understands the truth of the campaign. Normandy is a land of rivers, canals, and blown spans. If every crossing becomes a delay, the offensive stalls. If crossings are solved in hours, not days, the enemy never regains balance. This isn't engineering in isolation. It's operational warfare. Since landing on the beaches 5 days earlier, U.S. Army engineer battalions have been leapfrogging behind the infantry, moving almost as fast as the riflemen themselves. They don't wait for orders to build bridges. They anticipate the need, preload trucks, and push forward with components already sorted by size and function. The Bailey Bridge allows this in a way no previous system ever had. Each piece is light enough to be manhandled by 6 men. No cranes, no specialized machinery. Panels can be doubled, tripled, reinforced depending on the expected load. A bridge strong enough for infantry can be upgraded to carry tanks in a matter of hours, sometimes minutes. German doctrine, by contrast, assumes destruction equals delay. Blow the bridge, mine the approaches, fall back to the next defensive line. But the Americans have rewritten the equation. As Weiss retreats with his unit toward secondary positions, he passes the wreckage of another bridge, demolished earlier that morning. It should have been another obstacle. Instead, he already hears engines on the far side. Another Bailey, another crossing. Later that afternoon, further west near Isigny-sur-Mer, the pattern repeats. German rearguard units prepare demolitions, confident that the Vier River will finally slow the Americans. Charges go off successfully. The span collapses into the water. 3 hours later, an American reconnaissance patrol is already crossing on steel decking that hadn't existed at breakfast. To the men watching from the German side, it feels unreal, like fighting an enemy that refuses to acknowledge terrain, weather, or physics. Rivers, once natural allies, have become irrelevant. At a divisional headquarters miles behind the line, a German staff officer marks another bridge loss on his map. Red pencil strokes slash through blue lines that are no longer barriers, but invitations. How many engineers do they have? Someone asks. The answer is unsettling. Enough. The American system is built around redundancy and momentum. Engineer units are not rare specialists. They are embedded, plentiful, and empowered. Every delay is treated as a solvable problem, not an excuse to wait. For the German defenders, the psychological effect is immediate. You blow a bridge, expecting silence. Instead, you hear hammers, bolts tightening, engines revving. The enemy doesn't pause to reconsider. He adapts and moves forward, forcing you to fight on ground you didn't choose, and at a time you didn't expect. That night, Weiss digs in near a sunken road, listening to the distant clatter of vehicles that should not be there yet. His unit was supposed to have 12 hours to reorganize. They've been given 3. Rain continues to fall. Somewhere behind the American lines, trucks are already being reloaded with bridge components, panels stacked, transoms counted, everything prepared for the next river. Because everyone knows there will be another one tomorrow. The realization is spreading through the German ranks now, carried not by reports, but by experience. The Americans are not slowed by destruction. They are fueled by it. June 13th, 1944. The bocage country south of Saint-Lô, Normandy. Dawn breaks slowly beneath a lid of low grey cloud. The hedgerows steam as moisture rises from the soaked earth, and the fields smell of churned soil, cordite, and crushed vegetation. Somewhere ahead, another river waits, narrow, shallow in places, but flanked by steep banks and lined with mines. On the German side, Lieutenant Ernst Hoffmann studies his map with tired eyes. Blue lines crisscross the paper. The Weir, its tributaries, canals feeding into marshland. In pre-war exercises, these waterways had always been marked as defensive assets, natural pauses, places to regroup. Now they feel like lies. Hoffmann has already seen what happens when Americans reach a river. The drill is no longer mysterious. Infantry screens push forward. Smoke appears. Artillery brackets likely firing points. Then come the trucks. Always the trucks. Carrying steel that looks too simple to matter until it suddenly does. Prepare demolitions anyway, Hoffmann orders, but assume they will cross. It is an admission no German officer would have made a year earlier. That morning, charges are set on a narrow stone bridge spanning a canal near Pont-Hébert. When the Americans approach, the bridge is destroyed cleanly. Chunks of masonry tumble into the water, blocking the roadway entirely. The defenders wait. Minutes pass. Then the sound begins again. Metal striking metal. Voices calling measurements. The low growl of engines idling just out of sight. Hoffmann watches through field glasses as American engineers step into the open with an almost casual disregard for danger. Riflemen fan out to protect them, kneeling behind hedgerows, muzzles pointed forward. The Bailey Bridge comes together piece by piece, indifferent to the rubble beneath it. This time, the Germans fire sooner. Mortars walk towards the work site. A shell lands close enough to send water splashing across the panels. One engineer stumbles, falls, scrambles back to his feet, and keeps moving. No one breaks. The bridge reaches halfway across in less than 40 minutes. Hoffman feels the creeping sense of being overtaken. Not physically yet, but mentally. The Americans are operating on a tempo that refuses to sync with German expectations. Defensive plans assume hesitation, reassessment, consolidation. The enemy offers none. By midday, the crossing is complete. American infantry flows across, spreading out immediately, not bunching, not pausing. Tanks follow soon after, their weight distributed by reinforced panels that creak but hold. What was meant to be a choke point has become a highway. Further east, German reports stack up. Same story, same solution. Blown bridges answered by steel replacements assembled under fire. Rivers crossed not at traditional fords or intact spans, but wherever the Americans choose. A staff officer summarizes it bluntly in his notebook. Terrain no longer delays them. The truth is harsher. American engineers have removed geography from the equation. For the men at the front, the psychological toll is heavy. You retreat across a river expecting relief, only to hear enemy armor behind you before your boots have dried. Defensive depth collapses not because of superior numbers, but because time itself seems to belong to the Americans. That evening, Hoffman receives orders to pull back again. Another 10 kilometers, another river, another line that will not hold. As his unit withdraws, he passes a demolished bridge already marked with chalk by German engineers. The word gesprengt, destroyed, is scrawled across the stone. By morning, it will mean nothing. On the American side, Captain John Wallace rides forward in a jeep, scanning the countryside ahead. He doesn't need a map to know what's coming. He can read the land instinctively now. The dips where water collects, the culverts, the narrow valleys that funnel streams into obstacles. Each one is a problem with a known solution. His men are tired, soaked, and filthy. But there is a quiet confidence among them. They know that when the advance reaches water, they will not stop. Not long enough for the enemy to breathe. Wallace lights a cigarette, shielding it from the wind. Another river by nightfall, his driver says. Wallace nods. Good, he replies. We're ready. June 16th, 1944. German 7th Army Rear Command, Normandy. Maps cover the walls, layered with grease pencil marks and hurried annotations. Blue rivers are crossed out. Red arrows, once tentative, now stab forward with alarming boldness. The front line no longer resembles a line at all. It looks like a series of tiers. Oberstleutnant Friedrich Keller stands motionless, listening as reports arrive one after another. Bridge destroyed at 0600 hours. Enemy crossing by 0900. Armor sighted on far bank before noon. Each report differs in location. None differ in outcome. Keller has spent his career believing in the defensive logic of Europe's terrain. Rivers force pauses. Blown bridges force planning. Time favors the defender, or at least it always had. But the Americans are not fighting a traditional campaign. They are compressing time. What German intelligence failed to grasp, until now, is that the Bailey Bridge is not just equipment. It is a philosophy, a refusal to allow friction, weather, or destruction to dictate tempo. By mid-June, German commanders are issuing contradictory orders. Bridges must be destroyed, yes, but artillery must also be conserved. Engineer units are running out of explosives. Worse, every demolished bridge now requires manpower to guard, if only briefly, because an unguarded river means nothing anymore. And guarding every crossing is impossible. At the tactical level, the shock is even sharper. Near Torigny-sur-Vire, a German infantry platoon retreats across a narrow stream, blowing a wooden bridge behind them as they go. They dig in less than a kilometer back, expecting a few precious hours to reorganize. They get 40 minutes. The first American scouts appear while the charge's smoke still hangs in the air. Engineers follow almost immediately. The Germans fire. The Americans respond. And beneath the noise, the sound returns. Bolts tightening, steel aligning, structure emerging from chaos. One German corporal stares through his rifle sights, disbelief creeping into his voice. They are building it again, not tomorrow. Now. This repetition erodes morale faster than casualties ever could. You can fight men. You can retreat from tanks. But how do you fight inevitability? German after-action reports begin to use unfamiliar language. Words like unstoppable and mechanized certainty appear in margins. Rivers are no longer referred to as obstacles, only locations. Meanwhile, American command leans fully into the advantage. Engineer battalions are pushed closer to the front than doctrine once allowed. Risk is accepted. Speed is rewarded. Units that complete crossings fastest are reinforced first. The message is clear. Momentum matters more than caution. For Captain John Wallace, the days blur together into a cycle of water, steel, and movement. His men sleep in snatches, hands blister, uniforms never fully dry. But there is pride in what they're doing, a sense that they are shaping the battlefield in ways the enemy cannot counter. Late one night, Wallace stands on a finished bridge as tanks roll past him, their exhaust fumes mixing with river mist. He runs a hand along the cold steel railing. By morning, this bridge will already be behind the front. By afternoon, they'll be building another. Somewhere ahead, German commanders are still searching for a way to slow the Americans, unaware that the answer no longer exists. The campaign is moving too fast now, and the bridges keep coming. July 1st, 1944. Western Normandy, approaching the Untold Canal. Summer has finally burned through the rain. Dust hangs in the air now instead of mist, coating uniforms and clogging engines. The rivers are lower, the banks firmer. But the pattern does not change. For the German defenders, the calendar itself has become an enemy. Each day they expect the American advance to slow, to consolidate, to regroup. Instead, it accelerates. The crossings no longer shock. They terrify through their predictability. Gefreiter Karl Weiss, thinner now, dirt permanently ground into his skin, watches from a tree line as another Bailey bridge slides into place across a narrow canal. He doesn't reach for his binoculars this time. He already knows what he'll see. Panels, rollers, men moving with rehearsed calm. He thinks back to the first river near Carentan, the disbelief, the stunned silence. That emotion is gone. In its place is something worse. Resignation. This is how they fight, he mutters. Behind the engineers, American infantry barely breaks stride. Platoons cross, fan out, and push forward without waiting for the rest of the battalion. Armor follows close enough that the infantry can feel the heat from the engines. The front never has time to harden. For American commanders, this relentless tempo is no accident. Every successful crossing feeds the next one. Fuel trucks roll over bridges that didn't exist the night before. Ammunition follows. Wounded are evacuated back across the same steel spans, a continuous loop of advance and sustainment. The bridge is no longer just a means of attack. It is the spine of the operation. By early July, German units report that American forces are appearing in their rear faster than maps can be updated. Defensive lines dissolve not because they are smashed, but because they are bypassed. A river you retreat across in the morning becomes a liability by evening. At one battalion command post, an exhausted German major traces a finger across the map, then drops it. There is no rear anymore, he says quietly. The Americans are not crossing rivers to reach objectives. They are crossing rivers so that nothing can become an objective. For Captain John Wallace, the campaign has reached a strange equilibrium. He no longer feels surprise when the order comes. Next crossing in 2 hours. Of course it is. His men move automatically now, unloading trucks before the engines stop, stacking components in the order they'll be needed. The Bailey Bridge has become muscle memory. Steel panels assembled as naturally as breathing. Wallace watches one of his sergeants direct traffic across a completed span. Tanks, trucks, ambulances, all of them trusting the structure implicitly. None of them stop to look down. That trust is earned. The German army, by contrast, has lost faith in its own assumptions. Rivers once marked with confidence are now annotated with question marks. Engineer units hoard explosives, unsure whether using them is worth the effort. Some bridges are left intact, simply because blowing them seems pointless. By the time American forces break out of Normandy later in the month, the lesson is already clear to those who survived the retreat. The bridges did not win the campaign alone, but they ensured it never slowed enough to be stopped. Momentum, once gained, became destiny. July 25th, 1944. The outskirts of Saint-Lô, Normandy. The air trembles before the bombs arrive. American heavy bombers carpet the German defensive belt west of the city, the ground lifting and folding in on itself under the weight of explosives. When the smoke clears, the battlefield no longer resembles a defensive position. It looks like torn earth. Operation Cobra has begun. For the German army, already stretched thin and reeling, this is the breaking point. But what follows is not just a breakthrough. It is a release. As American armor and infantry surge forward through shattered lines, the familiar obstacles appear once again. Streams, canals, narrow rivers, twisting through the Norman countryside. Under different circumstances, these might have offered the Germans one last chance to stabilize the front. They do not. Engineer units move almost inside the assault columns now. Bailey Bridge components ride just behind the tanks, rattling over shell craters, unloaded before the dust settles. Crossings are no longer events. They are routine. A river appears. A bridge follows, and the advance continues. Gefreiter Karl Weiss does not see the bridge that finally convinces him the war here is lost. He hears it. It is the sound of American vehicles crossing water behind his unit, far sooner than expected, while German officers are still shouting orders to fall back. The enemy is no longer pressing from the front alone. They are everywhere. Weiss runs until his lungs burn, crossing fields, ditches, broken roads, only to reach another river and realize with numb clarity that it will not protect him. It will only slow him while the Americans flow around and across it. At a crossroads clogged with refugees and retreating troops, a German sergeant yells in frustration, "Blow the bridge!" Someone answers him, voice hollow. It won't matter. By early August, American forces are racing through France. The campaign has transformed from grinding attrition into movement warfare on a scale unseen since the opening years of the war. But with one crucial difference. This time, the Allies are the ones who cannot be stopped. For Captain John Wallace, the moment comes quietly. He stands beside a Bailey Bridge, spanning a modest river whose name he never learns. Tanks thunder past, bound for towns he has never heard of. He realizes, suddenly, that his unit is no longer reacting to obstacles. They are erasing them. The bridge behind him will be dismantled soon, loaded back onto trucks, and driven forward to the next crossing. Nothing here is permanent, except the direction of movement. In German headquarters, the maps are finally abandoned. The blue lines mean nothing now. Rivers have ceased to exist as defensive concepts. They are simply features of terrain the Americans cross at will. Later, long after the campaign ends, German officers will speak of many things with respect: American air power, logistics, armor. But some will speak quietly of something else. The moment they realized that destroying bridges no longer delayed the enemy, the moment geography surrendered.